You know what I got the other day, Pete? Stephen King's latest. Want to borrow it?
Do you know who you're talking to?
What do you mean?
Andy, when's the last time I read a paper book? It's been decades. I would much rather use Kindle, or better yet, Audible.
What am I thinking? I don't read paper books anymore either. I'm an audiobook guy all the way. For those looking to listen to the books behind the films that we talk about here on Movies We Like, not to mention all the other podcasts in the Next Reel family, get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at thenextreel.com/audible.
There are so many great adaptations from Movies We Like available in audio form.
Early on, we covered Casino Royale with director Matthew Gratzner. You went through all of the 007 books on Audible, right?
I did indeed. What a series. We also covered Room with legendary Dee Wallace and Never Let Me Go with costume designer Alana Moorehead.
We chatted about Fat City with cinematographer Sam Levy and Silver Linings Playbook with the great composer Harry Gregson Williams.
101 Dalmatians and Bambi.
Apocalypse Now, There Will Be Blood, The Thin Red Line.
There's so many great adaptations with so many great guests, and you can get all these as audiobooks on Audible, along with thousands of other great reads.
Producing this podcast is a lot of fun, but it does take a lot of time. We have already dropped the dynamically inserted ads because they are so annoying and have no connection to our content.
Plus, they just jam those things in wherever they see fit.
We listened when you said you didn't like them. So now, we're directly appealing to you, our dear listener. Please consider an Audible subscription to help support Movies We Like and the Next Reel's family of podcasts.
I've been using Audible along with my family for decades now. I love it, and I've read hundreds of books through it. Couldn't be more pleased with their service, and I know you'll love it too. Head to thenextreel.com/audible and get your free trial. It really helps us out. And you have a world of over 200,000 audiobooks open to you.
So much great material available. Dive in with a free trial and get your first free audiobook at thenextreel.com/audible.
Start listening to amazing audiobooks of your favorite movie source material with your first free audiobook today. That's thenextreel.com/audible. Andy, I know you've never been happier than when you're sitting by a warm fire, snuggled up in a flannel and basking in the glow of an old-school budget spreadsheet.
It is a special day I can shut down the world for a little me time.
In a world full of applications, why do these antiquated documents and spreadsheets still run the world? And why haven't they been updated in over 50 years? That's why we want to talk about Coda.
Coda is a new kind of doc that brings words, data, and teams together. It comes with a set of building blocks that anyone can combine to create a doc as powerful as an app.
Coda runs our entire business here at True Story FM, from show scheduling across dozens of podcasts and scripts for thousands of episodes, to budgets and plans and wikis and more.
Coda lets us see our business in a new light. If you'd like to shine a light on productivity in your business and save money along the way, check out Coda today at thenextreel.com/Coda. Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
The horror.
Each month on the Next Reel Speakeasy, we invite a guest from the film industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. We'd like to welcome our guest to this month's show, cinematographer Paul Cameron. Paul didn't get much exposure to photography growing up, but when he was about 15, his brother bought a Polaroid land camera. With that, he started taking lots of Polaroids, and that sparked his interest in photography and film in general. He went to school at State University of New York, Purchase, but because he couldn't afford to make many of his own films, he started shooting everyone else's films. Before he could graduate, though, Paul was asked to leave the school after an unauthorized use of equipment to shoot an underground club show, the B-52s. Despite that setback, Paul continued to learn and eventually got into the union and landed an agent. Since then, Paul has worked on some of the most visually groundbreaking feature films of the past several decades. Projects such as Man on Fire and Deja Vu for director Tony Scott, as well as Scott's entry in BMW Films' short film series, The Hire. Swordfish and Gone in 60 Seconds for director Dominique Sena. Total Recall for director Len Wiseman. And Dead Man Down for director Niels Arden Oplev. Paul's work with Michael Mann on Collateral confirmed the capabilities of the still young digital medium, immortalized now as one of the first major studio films to embrace digital cinematography. The film earned Cameron a BAFTA Award and the LA Critics Award for Best Cinematography. Paul is currently lensing Walt Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, to be released next summer. He also shot the pilot for the new HBO series Westworld, written and directed by Jonathan Nolan, which just started airing this past weekend. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Well, thanks for having me.
Paul, you have finished shooting the first episode of Westworld. It's, as we record this, it's going to release. I haven't been looking forward to a show quite this much since maybe Breaking Bad, maybe before that. Please tell me that my enthusiasm is not misplaced.
No, I don't think it's misplaced at all. It's it's a show that was was great to work on, and from the onset with Jonathan Nolan, we knew the potential of the material, and fortunate enough to be part of the pilot and hear a lot of what's to come in the season. So I think you'll be fine.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. In fact, we could talk about the movie we're here to talk about tonight, but mostly I sit relieved. That's all I needed from you today.
There you go. Good.
Oh, that's fantastic. But yes, we are here to talk about Apocalypse Now, which you had selected a few choices for us to pick from of your favorite films. And this was at the top of your list. Really, I mean, you sent a list of a bunch of fantastic films that we'd be happy to talk about. But boy, Coppola in the 70s, he was quite a filmmaker. And this is definitely one that we were interested in talking about. So here we are, Apocalypse Now.
Well, it's a film, for me, I don't think you can beat it. It's a mythical journey, and, it's visually stunning, and it's just a captivating film on many levels, and I probably watch it twice a year still, so it's hard for me to watch movies all the time, but certainly that film.
This is a film I discovered in college, and certainly ended up watching a good number of times back then, and it's just always stuck with me since then. It's just always been a personal favorite, so I was very excited that you picked it.
It's a fascinating film in so many ways, not the least of which, I think, is the fact that even though it is set in the Vietnam War, but hearing Coppola talk about it, he didn't want to shoot a war story. He wanted to shoot a morality tale, right? The story of this transition of kings. And in that regard, it doesn't really need to have been set in the Vietnam War, right? It doesn't really, that's not necessarily a requirement to tell this story. Yet the surrealism, I think, what they went for to capture the environment of the war certainly adds to the aesthetic. What is it about this as a non-war war movie that you think attracts you so much to the material?
Well, again, it's kind of a mythical journey into darkness. It's about a man who literally goes upriver and faces his deepest fears, and takes a hero's journey, and does a heroic act, and goes on, and that's really that's kind of the timeless aspect of it. And the Vietnam Cambodian backdrop is obviously timely, historical, and relevant to the story in many ways, but it also provided an extreme backdrop for this journey, and it's you've got the deepest, darkest jungles of Cambodia, and again, timely historically.
It's interesting that it was actually based on Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness. I guess you could say loosely based, but it certainly is one of those stories that I really enjoy. What John Milius, who wrote the script, and then Coppola, of course, kind of worked on it as he was filming it. I love what they did with it, kind of taking the essential essence, the themes of Heart of Darkness, and they found a way to translate all of that into a different place, which you don't see a lot with adaptations, but I really enjoyed that they did that here. In fact, I think it was in the 90s, I think Nicholas Roeg did just a straight up TV movie adaptation of Joseph Conrad's novel, which I don't think was received very well. But I think, this was a story that John Milius has talked about how much he connected with when he was young. Obviously, these guys at this time, and this kind of collective that Coppola Coppola had gathered around him with Milius and George Lucas and all these guys as he was developing his Zoetrope Studios, they all seemed to be very much, wanting to make films that meant something, wanting to tell stories that were more than just what they had grown up with in Hollywood in the 50s and 60s. They were really trying to push for something different. And I think that that they did a great job taking this story and kind of finding a way to, translate it into something that was very, I suppose, very personal and very, intense at the time for them.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's, again, very reflective of history, immediate history, but it's also, for me, it's like a contemporary epic. It's like The Deer Hunter. It's an epic film. And quite honestly, Apocalypse Now kind of reflected a lot of U.S. politics and social beliefs and kind of the chaos of the war and all the things that we feared about being in war. Anybody who saw that film, it was a complete confrontation of those fears and those realities. And I think it was also a wake up call for a lot of people watching it. And it's easier to watch that material and the darkness of that material than obviously to be part of it. And Coppola had an insane vision, and he marched through it. I forget what it took, 300 and something days to film it, and the insanity with Brando, and the challenges of being in the jungle with Storaro, and creating beautiful imagery, and it's quite the journey.
Another element that I think is interesting about this journey that they took in the script is tying it into Vietnam. Coppola had read a book by Michael Herr called Dispatches, which was, I believe, letters and things from people in the war, just kind of describing their experiences and just how harrowing it was, and just kind of that internal struggle that soldiers were having in the war. And this is an interesting example of voiceover narration that I think, it's one of those things that, screenwriters, people teaching screenwriting, they're always just kind of downplaying the, how voiceover and narration, how much you should use it. They're like, oh, it's overused. It's a way to get out of actually getting the point of your story across and all that. And I think that you watch a movie like this, and I think there's something that brings that internal element out, that kind of pulls that sense of the internal struggle that these characters are going through, and it's done in such a way that I don't know, I find it mesmerizing just as I sit and listen to Martin Sheen kind of have his little internal dialogues. It's powerful.
Right. It's also very elliptical. You've got these kind of stream of consciousness. Voiceover, that's like you said, is very reflective of his character and his journey, and it's kind of weaves in and out of the insanity, and going up river, and finding the bridge being blown up every day, and trying to find out who's in charge, and him trying to make sense out of it, and that's really one of the biggest parts of it is he's just trying to make sense out of his own life and his own journey.
In your work as a cinematographer today, what do you find that you are able to trace back to having learned from your experience digesting Apocalypse Now?
Well, certainly, in terms of cinematography and the craft, it's, beautifully photographed by Storaro, and it's, amazing use of natural light and, incredible, beautiful, fascinating lighting. It's there's a kind of minimalist style to his work in the film that's just stunning. And it's and I think that's kind of something I brought on in films with Tony Scott, and kind of embracing and using natural light quite a bit. And I can see that was a big thing for Storaro in the film, and of course there's gorgeous lit scenes, but there's kind of the use of natural light in a lot of ways, and there's a certain style to a lot of the film that goes in and out of being off eye lines and scenes photographed from, with multiple characters from, kind of edgier angles and stuff that also was something that was quite inspiring to me, that you didn't have to always be on a direct eye line. And, and I think it's also what you mentioned before is the kind of nature of the kind of poetic cinematography that is embraced in the film too. It's, we began, for me, seeing it in films like that, and in Badlands and Malick's films at the time too, where there, kind of this visual elliptical style that was kind of different. It was kind of modernist. So that was very good.
Speaking of elliptical style, something we talk about on this show is kind of the first shot and the last shot and how they kind of thematically connect and tie the whole movie together. And you've mentioned elliptical, kind of this elliptical storytelling, and definitely you can see a lot of that in the first shot and the last shot. And really, it's almost hard to pull just the first shot and the last shot because Coppola uses so many dissolves from a shot to a shot or multiple images on the screen at the same time. And you see a lot of the same imagery at the beginning and the end. I mean, the beginning starts with this line of palm trees. You hear kind of these helicopter, as they call it, the ghost helicopter sounds. And then, you get the Doors playing the napalm, and you kind of get this dissolve of this upside down Martin Sheen. And then at the end, you get essentially kind of the same thing. You get the boats leaving. You get a dissolve to this stone face and Willard's face, and then fire burning. And then you get how Willard's face and the stone face, that his face kind of moves over and the eyes line up as we fade to black. It's an interesting pairing that does kind of tie into that elliptical connection between the beginning and the end, and how the end is the beginning is the end sort of thing. It's all this connected internal story as this person makes this journey.
Yeah, but what I love about it, what's different, now in a lot of ways is I don't think Coppola was doing storyboards of these sequences. You know what I mean? So, suddenly, you've got this, you're in the editing room and you've got this incredible shot of, the helicopters coming over and the napalm exploding. And then you're sitting in a room about to shoot Martin Sheen and the fans going above your head, and you realize that that's the same image of looking up at the rotor blades going over you. And I think Coppola is very instinctual that way, and he's certainly instinctual with performance that way, and it's trusting that, and then you get to the edit room, and then you put those those ideas that you kind of had a year or two ago, and you try them. And back then they, let's try an optical dissolve, and it works, and it adds a layer, and it becomes something interesting. And, editors helping find stuff, while you're, they're cutting. In the end of the film too, it's just, how do you tie it up? Well, you want the end of your movie and your last shot to be the kind of defining moment. And it's, it's all things burning and the inferno at the end. And that's, I think he was pretty conscious about doing all that.
I think that's a really interesting point. It's something I made in my notes that intentionality comes in this case after instinct. And you can sort of feel Coppola saying, what would be great if. The number of times I get that sense in the film is practically innumerable. I'm always looking at a film like this thinking, okay, from the director's perspective, if he's holding up a mirror for us, what is his, who in the film really represents him and his journey? And I wonder what it would be like to see this film cold anymore, because I've watched so much of the behind the scenes stuff. I don't know if I would appreciate it as much not knowing the crazy journey that Coppola went on, sort of being both Captain Willard and Colonel Kurtz, right?
Yeah.
Fighting his own inner demons deep in the jungles of the Philippines.
Yeah.
This is so much or as much a story of the craziness that he brought to it as it is a story of Willard and Kurtz.
I think a lot of great directors innately they manifest chaos and out of a struggle to kind of understand their film and understand the content. And, the good ones are creatively chaotic, and they're trying things, and they're they're being, fearless, and they're trying to bring out the best in the actors, the best in the cinematographer, the production designer, everybody, and pushing everybody to their limits. Those are the positive ones. And, I think, by nature, that film was a struggle. It was, it's like other famous films like that, like Das Boot or whatever, where this, people go through these incredible journeys in their lives to make this film. And yeah, he's definitely both characters. He's Kurtz and Willard, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle to find himself, I think,
Well, and definitely, I mean, it's, as a director, it's definitely a tool that he talks about, this whole idea of wanting to get inside these characters' heads, wanting the actors to really inhabit them, knowing that the actors really want to kind of really take it to places. I mean, he talks about that with Martin Sheen in that opening scene that Martin Sheen has, where he's really kind of releasing these own inner demons that he has, and how difficult it was for Coppola to kind of let Sheen do what he needed to do, even though he just punched a mirror and now he's bleeding and getting blood everywhere. Do we need to stop production? Where's the responsibility lie? And in the end, they let it film, and then they checked it to make sure that he was okay. But it's interesting. Coppola really was pushing. I mean, he's really pushing the limits to really let everybody try things.
Well, he's pushing it, but he's also pushing it with, listen, at the time, a lot of actors were method actors too. A lot of people were, actors have been classically trained, and that was the thing, that was, becoming the character was the thing, and a lot of great directors still push actors to do that, but I'm seeing it less and less. And, it's, unfortunately, sometimes, because of schedules and everything, people don't take these risks and push people the way they need to push them, directors, and push their actors. And, they took the time to go deep, they took the time to go very deep. And you see the level of performance out of Sheen and the level of performance out of Forrest, and you see the level of performance out of Brando, and these are all iconic performances that most people will never forget if they see the film once.
Do you think some of that is because Coppola, I mean, essentially, he was doing this as kind of an independent film. I mean, he's funding it himself, essentially, as opposed to going through a studio where he also had to answer to the bottom line of the executive producers and the kind of corporate nature of that. I mean, I think some of that must be, here he was in the jungle. He was making this movie that went from, a 9-week shoot to 2.5-year shoot. Just kind of went through this own level of insanity that they all went on. But I certainly feel like a lot of that is just because, I mean, he was in a place, I mean, sure, he was mortgaging his vineyards, and he was kind of putting himself completely on the line to get this film made. But it really was this personal journey he willingly took to actually do this. And I just don't know. I don't know if you're going to get that if you're, even nowadays, or even then, if you were going through a studio.
No, I mean, listen, it was also, a similar time, when he was making this film, Woody Allen was asking for money for his films. And, part of the deal was, write a check for the full amount, and no questions asked, we'll, deliver the film in, 6-8 months, and I think, with Coppola and Apocalypse Now was such a complex undertaking, and certainly, I know, can imagine that after a couple of weeks of shooting, that he realized that this was a film that was worth risking everything for, and sometimes financially, directors go deep that way. We see it less and less now, but it's, it's also just having to make it and having to finish it. And I think that's the other thing about artists in general, is that it's about finishing it, and following through. And that's what he did. It only took 5 times the amount of time they thought,
5 times the amount of time, a million and a half feet of film, and his famous line on hearing that Martin Sheen has actually had a heart attack. Martin is dead when I say he's dead.
Yeah, that's good. There you go.
That's Coppola in the jungle right there. That's Coppola in the jungle.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was equally his journey as his characters.
Let's, as we work into the cast here, speaking of Martin Sheen, he was actually a replacement for the original and shot Harvey Keitel, which I find really interesting. And hearing Sheen talk about it, that he was nervous, that he had no military experience, and here he was replacing a guy who was a Marine, had 4 years in the military, and actually, Sheen says Harvey knew the right end of the gun. Like he was the guy, and felt really intense pressure taking over Keitel's shoes. I don't know. There's armchair quarterbacking, that could go on here, but really, when you look at Martin Sheen's performance, that his work in this film ended up establishing him as one of those iconic performers.
Listen, he was such a young, vulnerable talent. So, Keitel was, coming out of the mean streets era, of the streets of New York. So different characters, different, on-screen personas for sure. But I mean, listen, I love Keitel and I love his work, his early work too. But the kind of vulnerability and seemingly edginess of Martin Sheen's lack of confidence, if that was the case, worked for the film, in an incredible way. That performance is just, it's a stunning piece of work.
I thought it was interesting that Coppola himself said that Harvey Keitel was fantastic, but he's just such an intense present actor that it just didn't seem right for Captain Willard, who needed to be very kind of almost in the background, reserved, just more internal, and that I think was his struggle with Keitel, as much as he loved him and thought he was a great actor. And that's difficult. I can only imagine how hard it is for a director to have to cut someone from a film, particularly after they've started filming.
Yeah, it's got to be a hard thing, but it's, unfortunately, those decisions have to get made sometimes. And casting specifically is something that's, there's so much pressure for, from financiers and box office even back then that, it was a big consideration. It's much more now, but it's big directors wanting, in my experience with some directors that wanted to hire people instinctually and didn't do it. The films have suffered, and they've never forgiven themselves. And I think that's something that, Coppola made the choice and it was a good one at the time.
Yeah, definitely a great choice for this film. And speaking of just kind of casting big people or stunt casting in the 70s, I mean, certainly Marlon Brando was a big name, and bringing him on for Colonel Kurtz, contracted to film for 3 weeks at $1 million a week. That could be considered stunt casting, I suppose, at the time. Obviously they'd worked together on The Godfather, but here he is, this actor coming in. And it just, hearing the stories about Marlon Brando on set, I mean, obviously he shows up, he's gained a lot of weight. He's very kind of embarrassed about his weight and ends up sitting around talking to Coppola for like 5 days before they film, just to have these discussions about the role and how to play Kurtz and going back and forth and wanting to change Kurtz's name. It just sounds like, an actor stalling, and really just, it sounded like he was struggling, trying to figure out what to do with this.
He's such a powerful actor and was always a powerful actor. And, whatever was happening in his life with the weight thing or whatever, this is, a monumental performance in so many ways. And again, he knew the risks of hiring Brando. He knew the costs involved, the entourage that was coming, and the possibility of not shooting for a few days. And that's what happened. They shut it down and they talked and they figured it out. And, the film was only better for it. I mean, it's I can't imagine on a big film right now if, all of a sudden we get a call saying, hey, we're going to shut it down for 5 days while we talk to, figure this out. It just never happens, and it's just fabulous. He took, I think, again, Coppola, for him, it was, the rest of the world didn't matter. It only mattered of solving what he had to solve to make the film as great as possible.
Well, and he's talked about how, I mean, he walked into this film not even knowing how he wanted it to end. And he talks about that quite a bit. As he's filming, he's still trying to sort out the ending for the film. And I think part of the 5 days sitting there with Brando, I mean, Coppola may say, you know, yeah, Brando came and he didn't want to act for 5 days while we had these discussions. Very likely some of that could have been Coppola. You know, he's just like, well, maybe we can hash this out and figure out how this thing should go.
Well, as evidenced too by the amount of footage that was covered that was just straight up Brando improvising. You know, clearly there wasn't as much of a direction, you know, or they wouldn't have ended up with so much of that kind of material. It feels like to me.
Be great to see all that. That's for sure. I'd love to see it all.
Yeah, every
Is
bit
it
of
on
it.
the behind the scenes or no?
There's a little bit of extra, but not that I've found.
They do. Yeah, they have the full run of him reading the T.S. Eliot poem. You can listen to that
that's true.
The whole thing. But yeah, you know, Brando is such an interesting, compelling actor to watch, and I think that he makes this movie for me as much as Willard. I mean, these two, they're such a perfect yin yang of this story, really almost as if they kind of become one at the end. And, you know, that shot of Captain Willard coming out of the water where he's kind of painted and everything, it almost, you know, his face almost has this kind of Kurtz look to it, the way that his hair is all slicked back, almost looking like he himself has shaved his head, almost as if he's kind of becoming the same character. And I find these two guys such a perfect pairing in this film. I really enjoy watching them work off of each other in that last sequence.
Well, and I think their final fight, you know, it's sort of a shadow boxing kind of machete thing where you actually, I mean, they cut the same silhouette for me, right? When they're backlit from the outside staircase into the temple, and as you can sort of feel the way Willard is literally and figuratively taking the mantle with every slice. It's really fantastic. The other iconic performance, well, actually the other controversial performance, at least on set, was that of Dennis Hopper, the photojournalist who apparently, and I'm not sure if this is real or if it was manufactured, apparently Brando had some real trouble with Hopper, and I certainly not the first nor the last, but Hopper's, you know, when you look at them on set, you know, together, it really feels like, you know, the kind of the lion and the really annoying hyena. To me, that's sort of the relationship of them together that I find fascinating. Hopper also reportedly wildly underprepared or really struggling to figure out what his role was.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it was just a wild idea. Let's bring him over, you know, and I'm sure the discussions were, you know, he was going to play a different character and he wanted to play this kind of documentary photojournalist, you know, wild character, and I'm sure he just did whatever he wanted, and I'm sure everybody just hoped he showed up every day.
Yeah, no kidding. It definitely feels like Hopper. I mean, it just has that Easy Rider sort of vibe going all through it, which, you know, again, just feels so a part of the time, and it ends up feeling so wildly appropriate for the film.
It's interesting to see him play such a minimalist character at this age. You know, I mean, he is the character that sort of gets stomped on. He is the one who actually allows us to make the transition from the military into the tribe. So he's kind of the gateway to this other world. He's a utility player in that regard, certainly in the construction of the script, but then to be minimized so quickly as kind of the annoying parrot is really interesting. Robert Duvall, Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore.
Yeah, Duvall's great. I mean, again, he's another, you know, classic, iconic character, and you know, I mean, Bobby's just a fabulous actor.
Certainly one of the ones who has delivered some of the most memorable lines from the film. You know, just the, you know, I love the smell of napalm in the morning and Charlie don't surf. I mean, those two lines alone just seem to have entered the lexicography of things that people say now without necessarily even having seen the film, you know? And
no, I mean, he's great. He walks through fields with, they're exploding and with, putting on his bathing suit ready to go surfing. It's fantastic. He plays blast music out of the helicopter and he does represent kind of, the strength and fearlessness of a warrior,
And I mean, again, Robert Duvall had worked with Coppola before on the Godfather films, but I mean, seriously, when has Robert Duvall ever done anything that wasn't just a powerhouse performance? I mean, he's just one of those actors who is just always riveting when he's on the screen. I've just always enjoyed watching him, and here it's great, even though he has such a bit part for such a small portion of the film. It really kind of helps define this film as much as any of these other performances. These characters are all such interesting glimpses into the types of personalities that were scattered all through the Vietnam War. And really, I mean, you could probably look at them in almost any war.
I wonder how the film's perceived now, in term, younger audiences seeing it for the first time, because it's, now this is, a war 40 years ago, and it's a story, from quite a while back, so I wonder what that's like.
I do too, and actually, that's actually why I had children, was so that I could experiment with their film taste.
So you could show them Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, and so they're not quite there yet, but give me a couple of years, and I will report back. Let's see. In terms of the rest of the cast, we've got the guys on the boat: Frederic Forrest, Sam Bottoms, and Larry Fishburne,
and good old Albert Hall as chief.
Yep. Fantastic set of boys on the boat, both sort of terrifying and cavalier in their approach and their experience to the war.
Well, they also, looking back, it seems like this wonderful ensemble cast, but these are, I bet you if you look back, it'd be very few actors that actually worked with other actors, it's, outside of the Coppola, usual Coppola crowd. And, Forrest had worked with Coppola too at that point, right? I think.
Yeah, he was in The Conversation years before.
Yeah, The Conversation, which is awesome. I mean, it's but altogether, I guess it's kind of the Coppola ensemble in some ways, and it's such a magnetic group, and these guys are just they just all work so well. They just seem to be naturally. Like they've been in combat for months and just flawless in their performances.
This is a period of time where they, the way that they cast this, I love that they really kind of took time to do stuff in ways that felt kind of, in a way, kind of old school or theatrical. I mean, Coppola had all these different guys in. I think Fred Roos was doing the casting, and they basically just did all these readings, and they had a bunch of different actors in the room, and they would kind of all do these group auditions, and he would have people change roles and really try to get a sense as to who is working best. And it's interesting, and going through some of the special features, getting to see some of the shots from those readings when they were doing it, and you can see Nick Nolte in there trying it out, and it's really interesting to see how they would really kind of he would kind of mix and match and try to find the right roles. And yeah, he did an amazing job casting these guys. And I mean, knowing that Larry Fishburne came on when he was 14, and then he ended up having his 15th and 16th birthdays on set, and seeing the movie released when he was 17.
I don't think you punched that hard enough. He had his 14th and 15th and 16th birthdays on set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but this is again, it was a different time, and Coppola, they did sit in a room. They sat face to face.
Right.
They bounced things off of each other. And like you said, it was different combinations. You think, I'm sure it was like he wanted to cast in a different way, and he shuffled it around, and the chemistry exploded with the different characters as they took on the personas. And that's what he went with, and unfortunately, casting, it's hard to get actors all in a room together apparently now in cast. It's all done much more through agents and tapes and Skypes and
right. Actors don't travel for auditions anymore.
So it's like, you want the part, come and let's talk about it, and they do it, but there's also a depth of talent that Coppola's always, he's always had in all of his films. And I think it's, no character is unimportant to him. No face is unimportant to him. No detail of the film is unimportant to him. So when it comes to casting, it's probably outside of the script is the most important thing,
There's an interesting, well, obviously this film had its, I guess you could say, a rebirth in, I think it was around 2000 when they re-edited it and created the Redux version, which kind of put a bunch of sequences back in, including the French plantation. And we, of course, have a few great actors in there. Christian Marquand and Aurora Clement, who ended up meeting Vittorio Storaro here and got married to him, and still married to this day. It's an interesting journey watching this film kind of in its original form and then watching it in the Redux and kind of seeing some of these sequences added back in. What's your take on it? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really, I'll be honest with you. I again, such a fan of the original film that the Redux kind of, certain scenes like, the one you're describing with the plantation, colonial plantation stuff seemed to be like, I felt like I was just taken out of a movie that I was very, or an experience I was very familiar with. It was like listening to a record and putting, that you grew up with a record, and then suddenly they put a new song in the middle of it that was unreleased, and it changes the tone of the record. And, for me, I felt structurally the film was great. The original was great. And, I understand the want to make it better and incorporate scenes that weren't in the film, but it just, to me, it just didn't work,
For me, it hit me sort of the other direction. That French plantation scene, at least from a narrative perspective, it adds so much of the politics of the why we're here and why this is a struggle, and it sets up the futility of the war and makes that sort of mythic journey all that more powerful for Willard to head into the woods, because now he has a much more clear perspective of the fact that his journey is not one that is going to be of any utility to the military itself, because we've established that their mission there is useless. It was much more of a political statement, and now he realizes he still has to go. He is compelled to go into the woods and finish this story in the jungle. And so for me, I found myself this time in particular really appreciating that sequence was back. And I was surprised at that, because I like you, I found myself, I really appreciated the original cut, or the theatrical cut.
Yeah, I think both cuts for me work really well. I'm kind of, I think I'm one of those guys who once I discovered this film, I just completely fell in love with it, and just having more was just always a good thing. I just really enjoyed it. And having seen Hearts of Darkness long before I ever saw Redux, I really got a sense of some of the stuff that was missing. And I believe that they actually showed a good chunk of the French plantation sequence there. So I kind of was already familiar with it. I knew what was coming. I don't know. I enjoy having all of that in there. It's just all that extra meat and potatoes that for me, I don't know. I'm happy with either one. I actually rewatched the original to prepare for this one, because I'd seen the Redux. I don't think I had gone back to watch the original since the Redux came out. So for me, it was actually really refreshing to go back and just kind of see the original again and just kind of reconnect to that original version. And he liked all the stuff that was in there. It was one of those things, cutting for time for the distributor, and that's just kind of the nature of the industry. It is a business. You got to do these sorts of things to actually make things happen.
The thing that's most fascinating for me about the Redux in particular, that I don't know of any other film, at least I've heard no story of any other film where this has happened, where they actually went back and recut the film from the source material, and treated it like a new movie, and that sets this experience apart for me. And I find myself really wanting to explore the new decisions that they allowed themselves to make by actually going back to the original source, not just for these sequences that they took out and replaced in whole, but for every cut. I think it's interesting to look at.
I wasn't aware of that. That's great. Is it the same editor?
This is Walter Murch, who went back into the second one.
Yeah, he was one of the editors when it first came out, but I think it was just him working on Redux.
And Walter, he must have been with them through the whole shoot.
Yeah, I believe he was, but I think he was more focused on the sound side of things. I think he did some of the editing. I know they kind of split up the editing. I think Jerry Greenberg really kind of just was doing the helicopter sequence. Like one report says he was editing that for a full year. Lisa Fruchtman was another of the editors, and Walter Murch. So I think that it sounded like Coppola would kind of give people different sequences to kind of have them just play around with it and just see how different people's opinions brought different scenes to life, which definitely seems like a kind of a Coppola zoetrope sort of way of thinking.
Andy, you made a note on the theory of philosophy and spirituality of color. What is that all about?
Well, I know Coppola definitely talked about Vittorio and just kind of how he and Vittorio kind of worked this as they went along filming. They just started playing with color, and I think it sounded like they both kind of fell in love with those color smoke flares. They would put those out there, and they just both fell in love with these colors, and so they really started playing with the different colors and what they could do with them, and how the colors kind of changed things and created different vibes for certain sections of the film. And Vittorio certainly seems like a cinematographer who has adapted that philosophy through his career. I feel like he's been the director of photography on some films that have just amazing use of color. And as a cinematographer, I mean, obviously, you're really working with the light and you're playing with kind of the look of the films and everything. But I mean, you go to a film like this, and then you see a film like The Last Emperor, and I just feel like he really has a good hand in tying some of the philosophies of color into the way that he's helping the director tell the story. What's your sense of that?
Well, I feel the same way. It's, listen, he certainly has explored color in the most kind of subtle emotional ways than many cinematographers, and I think he developed kind of the need to explore things, for how to enhance things emotionally, and I know it's been a pursuit his whole life to kind of complete that in many ways, and certainly working with Bertolucci early on, to me, was some of the best uses, and The Conformist, and there were more chances back then photographically, I think, in terms of putting that out there, and it's his work is some of the most sublime use of color out there.
Just beautiful stuff. And he would go on to work with Coppola in One from the Heart, and Tucker, The Man in His Dream, which is one of my favorite Coppola films, and then his segment in New York Stories. And I think he ties in really well with the production design. Dean Tavoularis and the production design here, I think it's just also top notch. I really enjoy just all of this stuff. Even though you hear these stories about Coppola and the whole the typhoon destroying the whole the set and having to get it rebuilt and all that, but I think that all of these people just rode with all of that so well, just making some beautiful stuff for this film.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's used to it. I mean, he's done some Sheltering Sky and Little Buddha, and big films, big journeys. This was, I'm sure for him was early on was just the beginning of an incredibly long journey in his life. I mean, he certainly has one of the best careers and best bodies of work of any cinematographer out there.
The other big thing that I think came from this film, I mean, obviously the look and everything is key, and the editing, which took a very long time. The sound design for this film it's really it came at a critical time. Coppola and Walter Murch really wanted to do something with the sound, and Walter Murch essentially, I mean, this is kind of the grandfather of the whole 5.1 stereo surround. I mean, they released this in quadraphonic sound, and there had been other films that had played around with that, but this really is where it all kind of came from, the way that they were separating the different speakers, and they especially right from the very beginning, when you hear that ghost helicopter coming, it kind of goes around you several times, and just from speaker to speaker. I mean, it's beautiful sound work all through this film, and I think you can't talk about this film without talking about just the brilliance of Walter Murch and just everything that he did working with Coppola to kind of define the sound of this film.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw it was at the Ziegfeld in New York City, and I'd never experienced anything like that. Like you said, is like suddenly helicopters were coming from behind and through and beyond me, and then the explosions, and then obviously, everything from the mixing on the war tracks to the music to the dialogue to the voiceover was, for me, beginning of this kind of modernist soundtrack experience, and it was incredible.
Carmine Coppola is the man behind the music, written for orchestra and then translated to synth.
So fascinating, and it seems kind of fitting for the tone of the film. It seems certainly for the time, the Moog synthesizer, just that whole sound, it just kind of has that ethereal, otherworldly sound that really fit for this film. And my understanding is that it was the largest at the time, the largest Moog synthesizer in existence that they used for this film. And then Mickey Hart and his group, what's his group? The Rhythm Devils, I believe. They came on to do all of the percussion and like the intense percussion bits that you have, particularly toward the end. Just lots of really intense, great stuff.
I surprise myself with it, that I really do like the music, the soundscape, the overall synthesized soundscape. I usually don't, and it takes me to this dark kind of John Carpenter place when I hear this kind of stuff. But it really, I really find it. I mean, to your point, Andy, I am so surprised that I actually hear the whole thing and feel like it is all connected. It doesn't sound dated to me. It sounds of a period, and I really appreciate it. But for me, this film will always be inextricably connected to The Doors.
Yeah,
and the end. I mean, that sets the tone for the entire film. The trailer, all of the marketing is around that quintessentially perfect piece.
Yeah, and it's funny because Coppola was in film school with several members of The Doors, and this was that early time when Jim Morrison was trying to figure out what to do, and he and some of his bandmates were in film school, and I don't know if Coppola was able to just ask them directly, hey, let me use some of your music in your movie, but yeah, they definitely connected, and yeah, I completely agree with you, Pete. The Doors feel iconic with this film, and beginning the film with the end, I think is a kind of I think it's a perfect way to start this film, and it might be a little bit of an in-joke by Coppola as well.
Sheehan is kind of channeling more Morrison a bit too, for me watching it. It's it's definitely he's letting go, and when he's in his room in the beginning of the film, and when he's running in the jungle at the end, it was quite perfect to have Morrison playing.
Absolutely. The other thing that always stands out to me as an iconic piece of this film, and actually, as I think back to it, this is actually my introduction to this film, was the just fantastic, beautiful, iconic poster that Robert Peake designed for it. Just that incredible, the black poster with that red sun and Brando's face, and the burning bridge, and you have Martin Sheen up in the corner. That to me was my introduction to this film, and it was an image that haunted me, and I never really knew anything about the movie. I just that image was just such a haunting image, and when I saw the film, I really was able to kind of finally understand what this poster was about and why it looked the way it did.
It's frightening. It's actually a frightening poster.
It really is,
but it's beautiful, and I think, but there was also a desire then to make, with posters specifically, to give a feeling of this film, giving feeling films in the 70s and show some of the content in a way that was extremely imaginative. And, obviously, a lot of posters lean toward heavy graphics or whatever, but this one has a lot of attributes from the film, including, I think it also has helicopters going through the...
It does.
Right?
There were actually two of these posters that he'd done, one of them with the burning bridge and the faces, the other that is much more gentle, and it really harkens to the mystery of what is upriver. It's just the burnt orange river with a lot of helicopters in the very far distance over the sunset there in the jungle, and there is no face. There are no faces, no burning bridge. It's just the river and the jungle and fog and the helicopters. And so when you look at these two, I think they use the Brando Sheen poster on Redux as well. So that one has sort of supplanted, I think, the original. But it's fascinating looking at these side by side to see kind of the transformation that they've made with these posters. Both of those were Bob Peak.
Yeah. A lot of great stuff from him. This film did really well for itself. Once it was released, I know they were kind of unsure of what was going to happen at the time, and they played it at Cannes and everything. But it was received pretty well. It ended up at the Academy Awards for 1979. It won Best Cinematography and Best Sound, both of which I think are fitting. It was nominated for Best Picture, lost to Kramer versus Kramer. Nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Robert Duvall, who lost to Melvin Douglas for being there. Coppola was nominated for Best Director, but lost to Robert Benton for Kramer versus Kramer. Likewise, Best Adapted Screenplay, and then Best Art Direction, Set Decoration, and Best Film Editing. Those nominations, those lost to All That Jazz. Not a lot I can argue with. I really enjoy all of those films. Kramer versus Kramer, we've talked about that on the show. I really love that film. I think that Apocalypse Now may stand a little higher in my mind over Kramer versus Kramer, despite the strength of the film. But that's where it was with the Academy Awards, which I think is I think considering the struggles that Coppola went through making this, I think it might have felt good to at least get some nominations out of it.
That's exactly where I am on this, Andy. Just because it feels like emotionally more satisfying to think that all of the craziness and the work that went into making this film over years, they should have gotten something more in terms of the not. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't know if they thought about it that much.
I know that's the loss.
And I'm sure there was a big party with Vittorio that night. So
yeah,
I'm sure they all enjoyed it.
Right, exactly. They still had a good time.
How did it actually perform at the time, Andy?
This film did well for itself. Going into a film that is supposed to be a 9-week, about $12 million budgeted film, this film ended up. It cost about $31.5 million. It was released August 15th, 1979, and ended up, it ended up making domestically about $83.5 million and internationally about $2.5 million. So all told, definitely made its money back, and it ended up making an adjusted profit per finished minute of about 1.1 million per finished minute. So it did pretty good for itself in our list of movies.
Especially for such a long movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he got to keep his house. So.
Yeah, right.
He did. He got to keep the house. This made for the birth of Zoetrope, right?
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is probably why we still are able to drink some of his Coppola wines.
There you go. Toast Apocalypse Now. I think we should rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you will see our list of all of the films, over 260 films that we have ranked on this film, side by side, filmo a filmo. We're going to do it with Apocalypse Now right now. Andy?
All right, first up, Apocalypse Now or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? For me, it's easy.
Yeah,
Apocalypse
Now for me.
Apocalypse, for sure.
All right, Apocalypse Now or Contagion, little Steven Soderbergh disease film. Definitely Apocalypse Now for me.
Me too.
Apocalypse Now. I have to do it.
Apocalypse Now or Aliens, getting up there.
This is where it gets hard. I think if I were sitting on a desert island and I had only Aliens and Apocalypse Now, I would probably put on Aliens first.
Wow.
I know.
Aliens first.
Yeah. But that's my era, right? I grew up, that was much more my period.
Oh, it's a stunning film, completely different. I'm afraid I'll have to go Apocalypse.
Oh, so it's up to me.
Tiebreaker.
Yeah. Man, sorry, Paul. I gotta go with
going Aliens.
Yeah, but again, it's of my era. That was definitely a big film for me when I was young. Apocalypse Now or LA Confidential?
Oh,
this is a sad one.
Oh, it's tough to put these
sad
against each other. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Especially with the recent loss of Curtis Hanson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Apocalypse, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I am really stuck.
That's a tough one.
I think I've got to go Apocalypse again. Love LA Confidential, Chinatown. I would, if you told me Chinatown, then we have a real decision there. Yeah.
I feel lucky that I can. It's a principled loss, so my vote doesn't matter. But I think I would be LA Confidential on this one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Apocalypse Now is still taking it.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now or Ace in the Hole? Billy Wilder, Kirk Douglas.
That's definitely Apocalypse Now. Hands down. That's an easy one.
You're gonna have to go. I can barely remember it.
Okay. Apocalypse Now for me also.
All right. Good.
Apocalypse Now or Fight Club?
Fight Club.
Really?
I love Fight Club so much. Oh, yes.
David's not listening. I think David would be happy if I said Apocalypse Now.
I'm Apocalypse Now also. Yeah.
All right. I did my part.
There, you did your part. You did your part. Apocalypse Now or The Fisher King? Some Terry Gilliam action there. Apocalypse Now for me, though.
God.
I like you're struggling on these, Paul.
No, it's Fisher King is stunning. It's a great story, humanistic story. But I'll go with the epic again. Apocalypse. I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm a Fisher King man on that one, but
okay.
All right, Apocalypse Now or The Matrix?
Oh dear. Now I've gotten in trouble recently for ranking The Matrix higher than some other excellent films.
Oh really?
Yes,
Yeah.
We've gotten mail, so I'm sensitive.
Apocalypse Now for me.
I think I'm Apocalypse Now too.
Okay, then I'll say Apocalypse.
Now you're getting it. You just wait it out.
There we go. Right.
Wait it out. There you go.
Well, that lands it at number 34 on our list of films, which is really high. Yeah, 34 out of 265. So it's way up there. We have Network as number 1 on our list.
Outstanding.
But yeah, I mean, this is of the Speakeasy films. Personally, this is my favorite of all the Speakeasy films that we've talked about on the show so far. So for Letterboxd, this is an easy 5-star film for me.
Oh yeah,
easy 5. Easy 5.
Absolutely,
Easy 5.
absolutely.
All right, Paul. Here we go. We did. That was a fantastic pick. It's like you just really nailed it. It's a pick that we absolutely need on our list and our catalog of films that we've talked about on this show. So for that, thank you very much. What are you doing right now that you're happy and excited to talk about? Give us a plug.
Well, right now I've got I think we've got the pilot for Westworld coming out in about a week or so on HBO, and I'm just over in London shooting a film called The Commuter with Jaume Collet-Serra, a Liam Neeson film, and Vera Farmiga. And we got about 10 more days of principal photography on that, and heading back to Los Angeles to do the digital intermediate for Pirates, Dead Men Tells No Tales, which did a little over a year ago, and we're finishing that up for summer release. So looking forward to coloring that, and that's about it. Gonna head back to the U.S. and finish that and see what happens.
So just out of curiosity, so once you shoot a film like, a big film like Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, how long are you doing the coloring for a film like that?
Well, actually, the film, typically they try to finish within a year, and usually release date is within a year of principal photography. In this case, I think they wanted to hold off and have a summer release in July. So Jerry Bruckheimer in the studio decided to go for a longer finish on the film. So the actual amount of time is pretty much the same no matter what. A film this size is probably about 3 weeks of coloring, 3 to 4 weeks of coloring. So, it takes a lot. There's a lot of visual effects, a lot of layers. So it takes a little bit of work, and it's done digitally, and it's coming out well, and look forward to it.
Do you find yourself having to, did you have to go back quite a bit to the previous films to try to tie in a similar look, or how did that work? Were you allowed to kind of have some free reign?
It's, Derek Walsky, the cinematographer for the first 4, is, an amazing director of photography. And, I think we were trying to, both myself and the directors were trying to kind of carry on parts of the look of the franchise aspect of it, but you'll see some new stuff and some different lighting styles and hopefully some good surprises.
Fantastic. Well, we can't wait to check that out. And of course, Westworld, lots of great stuff coming. Where should people find you? Are you on Twitter, Instagram? Are you online at all? Do you have a website you want people to look at?
I do. I have a website, paulcamerondp.com.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Well, Paul, thank you again so much for joining us in the Next Reel Speakeasy today.
Good to hear from you guys.
For those of you out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, Letterboxd, Flickchart, and YouTube. And of course, don't forget to head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and comment. It really does help more people find us. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm off to head up the river.
I'm gonna use you to be my friend.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise we aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today.